Alright guys, this is what we're making today. It's a table saw fence. The previous one I had on here, very terrible. This is a design based off of John Heisz. His table saw fence is very nice and he does a really good job. It works really well, but still my table saw is very wobbly still, but I'm gonna make a bench that actually attaches to the sides and everything like that to give it more stability. But for the most part, I've been cutting with it and it's been pretty fantastic and I can't be any happier with it compared to my original table saw fence, which was really bad. So it was so crooked. It was making my pieces come out so bad that I didn't even want to work with it. You know what I mean? And you're wasting material. So, all right, let's just jump into it. Let's start making this thing. All right, I want to address something to you before we get this video started. I want to let you know that this channel is not an educational channel, not a how-to channel. It's basically a person in a workshop just making things. And if you learn something along the way, then great. If you don't, there's a ton of other YouTube channels out there that can teach you a lot more than I can. And then depending on your level and skill that you're at currently, you probably need to seek out someone that can actually teach you more technical abilities. I learned a lot myself from just watching a bunch of YouTube videos, and I also learned personally from William Douglas here in Phoenix, Arizona. So check out William Douglas. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or just getting started, intermediate, or an expert. There's a lot of content there for you that you're gonna definitely learn a lot from. So William Douglas Co. on YouTube. Check him out on Instagram too as well. And then so I want to let you know that this channel specifically for me, it's just a person in his shop tinkering, just making something. And even in this video, I make a ton of mistakes and I do correct them and I do figure it out. And I hope with that, you do end up learning something. If this entertains you, hit subscribe, come along for the ride and see if you can find something that's worth it for you. All right, let's get started. Alright guys, since you're here, I want to ask you an important question. Does the world need another maker's channel? Maybe, but we're going to find out by using that camera and the tools that I acquired to make the things that I think that are cool. Because I think people are hungry for more entertainment, more content, more knowledge, and hopefully you can learn a few things along the way while I'm learning a few things along the way. First, I want to address this table saw, this blue elephant in the room that I got off of OfferUp. It's from Century Machinery. Pretty nice actually, but it's very unstable. The insert that was in there prior was very unsafe, so I got this one from Rockler, and this is a zero clearance insert, but I had to do a few things to make it fit this, but not too much from the table saw's perspective, but just the insert perspective itself. And then it didn't have a riving knife, so I had to put this thing in. The reason why I'm bringing up the table saw itself is because the first thing I want to make is this fence. So the fence of this table saw, it came not straight or not balanced very well, and I think that's because I had to take the table saw apart when I actually had to transport it. My small BMW i3, that something came off alignment, or the way that he had these rails on here. I think he custom made these rails for this table saw. This does not look original. This thing had to be definitely dialed in when I put it back together, which is not a problem. I kind of like it now that it is sort of straight, but there's a lot of problems with it. Like when you go to tighten the fence kind of moves left and right, but it is square. I bolted everything pretty tight, so it works fine for what it is. I want to make a more solid one that works with one lever action instead of this twist action. I mean, you could see how like unsteady it is too, so that can get very dangerous. And incorporate this table saw into the workbench so it's all one piece. And then there was a router table that came with it, like a tabletop, but it's so unleveled and so dangerous to the point where I can't use it for that purpose. So I kind of want to make another router tabletop that's attached to the table saw, that's attached to the bench, that is all leveled and all squared, and it doesn't do this rocking motion while I'm pushing stuff through this table saw, which is highly probably very against OSHA. So let's go ahead and get started and let's answer that question. Does the world need another maker's channel? I have this plywood with melamine top and bottom already available to me. I think it's 3/4 inch, but I'm gonna start with this. But the only problem is I don't have a piece that's going to be long enough for the rail. The rail should be at least Hey, 76, my favorite number. So I think we might have to go full 76. Actually, this kind of butts out a little. I like the width of this workbench, so I'm gonna stay with the width of that workbench. I've never cut this before, so I don't even know how it's going to react on the table saw. So essentially this whole veneer top can actually just explode out and then just look really ugly. I think it'll look really cool as a table saw fence, and it'll look really cool as a table saw slide. Like if I can make my entire workbench and table saw top and hardware with rails and fence with this melamine, it'll look very cool, I think, in the workshop. So I gotta cut this by 36. Ow. So I hope that this side of the board is square, because that's what I'm banking on for that being a straight line. Now it's time to set up for a cut. So when you're cutting on a table saw for safety, you kind of want the table saw blade to be just right above where your material is, because that's going to save you from having a high blade and then potentially getting more kickback because of just a blade being out so far, and then potentially just getting cut because of a high blade. So just keep it simple, keep it small. So this is going to be kind of a harder piece to kind of cut because of the limited space that I have. But I think I can figure this out. It's good to have long arms. So we could also use this piece as a template after too as well, without having to measure, so you can have an accurate cut for both pieces. And I'll show you how to do that. If that's lined up, make sure you have your safety equipment on. Looks like a lot of the blowout that I'm getting is on the back from the table saw. Make sure that all the nasty bits are just where you don't want to see, because I don't think you could sand that out. Yeah, that's bad. I just want to double check to see if everything is square, because I don't know if it moved on that fence. That's why I don't like that fence. Everything is looking pretty good. The cut's looking pretty well on the back end. Yeah, let's make another one just in case. So that's going to be my cuts. The saw blade's going to go on the other side of that cut, and this is 3. It's a little off the 3. That's probably just because of my table saw. So we're going to just use that template, because obviously we're going to get the most accurate reading using the template itself, just cutting on the right side of the saw. This is something that you have to look at, because it didn't cut all the way through, and the reason is because my table saw top is higher than my workbench, which is my outfeed table. That longer piece at the end went downward, and then this went upward, so the table saw didn't go all the way to the top of it. That's why sometimes having your blade higher is good, just a little bit depending on your configuration of your workshop. I want to measure again just to be sure. So this has to be about 32 inches. Wait, is my math wrong? I was saying 32 inches before, but it actually has to be 36 inches to make 72 inches. My math was wrong there. I do have these lines marked at 36. Perfect. Kind of want to get rid of the edges, right? Maybe? No, the edges are fine. Alright, so I want to cut them at the same time. Good thing that this chop saw has a laser. I'm going to use this clamp to make sure that they stay together when I do cut them. So this clamp is not completely tight, so there is room that I can move to micro adjust right now, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just micro adjusting, and then when we really go for that cut, we'll clamp it one more click. There we go. I have my laser dialed in on this chop saw here. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. I have it dialed in so it cuts to the right of my line. Perfecto. So I cut this new piece just a little thicker than what it's actually supposed to be. But so if I used a template from one of the other pieces that I've already cut, that's the perfect size, I could just use it as a guide. So I'll just butt it up against the blade and make sure that when you're pinching it against the blade that it doesn't push the blade too much, because then you're going to get a deeper cut than you want. You want it to just move the blade also slightly. Perfect. Boom. Perfect. Perfect. That should be able to slide just right. For some reason, this piece has a little bit of a bow on it. Hopefully when I screw it onto the top sliding rail part, it actually straightens out and flies right. Since we're here, I want to show you how this is supposed to look. Gonna kind of lean out just a little, and then it's going to be double stacked like this. So the fence will be able to slide in this gap right here. And there's going to be another piece that's going to be vertical like this that is going to attach to the bottom, and this part is going to attach to the actual table saw. And then there's going to be another smaller piece that's on the bottom of that that's going to secure all of it all together. So that this gap is going to be really nice for table saw fence to slide on. And this is not even the fence, right? This is just the rail that it's going to ride on. Let's try to dry piece this together before we start countersinking and putting some screws into it. Bottom piece is here. Yeah, that's gonna work. Okay, yeah, let's get this together then. Wait, let me see the thickness of this. Oh boy. So, and then the thing just slides. So the rail will just slide right here in this gap. Do you see that? Do you see this? That's how it looks. Oh, it's gonna look so good. Let's start tapping holes and let's start putting this thing together. It's gonna be great. So we ran out of time yesterday, but today's a new day, and I spent my evening last night making this small parts sled. It's got clamp features and it's got a measuring feature here. It's meant for zero clearance, so when you're pushing like small parts through the table saw, it's a lot safer and a lot more accurate. Everything is square and perfect on this thing. I spent way too much time on this. Right now the shop is still a mess from last night. We have to take care of that first and foremost, so let's do that. All right, it's clean. I want to get started, and I think today we have all the slide pieces. All we have to do is dry fit it, get it together, get some countersinks in there, and get some screws in there to hold it all together and make sure it's straight and flat and nice. So I'm usually listening to music while I'm in the workshop, so filming kind of puts a damper on that. That kind of sucks, but also Phoenix, it's gonna be 80 degrees today, so it's gonna be kind of hot in the workshop, so that's also gonna suck. But so when you want to put your boards together, your melamine, you gotta make sure that you look for the chips in the board from the table saw. So you want to hide those, either put it under, or when you are actually mounting the pieces together, put the chip parts facing each other. That way you have a cleaner surface on the top and bottom. When I'm putting on the chips on the inside, it looks like a really cool clean piece. But also let's make sure it's flat and straight while I drill the hole. So you can just lightly clamp it at first, so you can kind of wiggle it around still, and then there's still a little pressure applied. When you get it aligned to the way that you are satisfied with, then you can go ahead and just clamp her down. And when you do clamp it down, it's still going to lightly shift, so make sure you're putting pressure on it too as well before you do that final clamp down. Sometimes it doesn't move, sometimes it does, but then when you're working with smooth surfaces like melamine to melamine, it's going to be slippy. That's good, but I want to put another clamp just in case. It is really slippery because it is melamine. Melamine. I'm gonna go with the 40-inch fence on this. I don't know if that's too much or if that's going to be bad. Okay, cool. Now that I have this visual gauge of how the fence is going to look on my table saw, I like it. I like the length, and I think it's going to work well for the things that I normally cut with. Now that we have all the fence pieces cut, we have to make the mechanism that helps it slide on the rails. So I have my pieces now that is going to be part of the sliding rail. This part is gonna go and touch the bottom rail, and this is going to rest under the top rail system. So I need a little piece that goes on top of here where the entire bottom of the rail can sit. So now that we have the actual sliding mechanism where it's going to rest on top of the rail and also against the side of the rail, and then the fence is going to mount on that, we are on to one of the trickiest parts, and one of the parts that I've actually been dreading, which is making the handle. The reason why I've been dreading it is because I don't have a bandsaw or a saw to actually cut out the shape. I already have this piece of foam. I'm going to use this for the bottom layer just so I don't go ahead and route all the way into my surface of my workbench. That would be very bad. This is probably overkill, but I want to use a full big piece just to cut out a little piece. I don't want it to move on me. Moving would probably be the most dangerous thing you can do with a router. You don't want any movement at all. So I don't currently have a protractor, but I found that the top of this can is about 2 inches, which is the circumference that I need of a circle. That's perfect. The only thing is it's filled with a little bit of beer, so I gotta get that out. Look at that. Perfect. So that's my 2-inch circle. You're gonna want to make it a handle, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect right now because I'm gonna sand it down anyways. Just want to make sure we have some sort of concept there, and just drill out that hole right now because I think it'll be easier than doing it when it's loose. All right, got all the way to the foam. That actually worked way better than I thought it was going to. Hey, I'll take it. I could chip that out, sand it all down, and we got a ramp. It's not perfect, but it is mine. 80 grit sandpaper and see how this chunk reacts. So I think it reached a high of 80 in Phoenix, so it is a little hot right now, but I cannot believe how this turned out. This turned out so good without having a bandsaw or a saw, but I learned a lot, and I should have probably taped the piece down so it didn't fly out when it was done too as well. But so now we have 4 more pieces left, which is what actually holds this handle together. And then so what we have left is to assemble everything and then mount it on, and then we'll see if it works or not. All right, so now I got my last 4 pieces cut, so they're gonna kind of clamp together like so, and then the handle's gonna go in between that. You know what, we're gonna risk it for the biscuit. So I have it pretty clamped tight. I use this bar as a flat edge, and then I use the table as a flat edge before I clamp this last one in. And then I'm gonna use this part to clamp onto the table while I try to drill this as straight as possible. Will that actually screw in? It'd be funny if that screws in. I think we're good. It's not the cleanest holes. Yeah, I wish I had a drill press, but hey, we did it. Boom, boom, boom. And then where's my handle? Where's you go, handle? I don't know how, but I cut this sort of egg shape, this guitar pick. Handle. All right, now that we have all our pieces cut and laid out, I want to make sure that this fence box talks to this fence mount, and this mount slides on this fence rail properly, and everything is just in unison, and everything's talking, and everything's straight. All right, let's kind of finagle that and get this together and see what we need to adjust, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to attach the actual rail mounts to the table saw. But first I want to make sure the table saw is level. That's as good as it's going to get. And then I'm going to put this on here and make sure that this is leveled too as well. So do you see where this slot rail, this is 3/4 inch slot on the top of my table saw, but I want the top of this guide rail to just touch that top part right there. I don't want it to block it because I do want to put my sleds through there still, right? I'm going to mark it down from here to the center of that hole, and that's what I'm going to drill my hole in this slide rail. What's cool about my table saw top that it's already pre-tapped, so these bolts go directly right in. Yours might be different. It could be a bolt that goes straight through and there's a nut on the other side. So as you can see, I made the holes a little bit bigger. That way that I can still adjust it a little, so it's not completely flush every single time. So if the rail starts getting warped or something like that, I have a little bit of wiggle room so I can micro adjust it to get it straight again. Sweet. so I don't have any gaps or anything like that, so that's good. All right, let's put the top rail on and let's put the fence on, and then we can see how everything correlates with each other. So if it's not as smooth as I need it to be, I could always sand where the seams are. Let's clamp this down on one end and see how the fence slides around on it. Looks like we might not even need this riser piece at all, even though we took our time to get it all dialed in, which kind of sucks. But if we remove this, I think that this bottom part of the fence box can rest on this mount, and then it'll be flush with that tabletop. Let's hope. Let's try it. Let's get this removed. It's time. We're gonna put some of this fence together now. This is the sliding bracket. Good thing we already have some pre-drilled holes. So, and these holes are actually pretty accurate. So now that we have our table saw fence bottom box lined up, it's really square to the table saw top. I'm really happy with that. Let's start putting on these sides now. There's a little bit of a bow on each of these pieces, but that's not a problem because we're going to screw in one side first, and then as we're screwing along, we're going to make sure that it is square to one side of the fence. So as you can see here, I'm going to clamp as I go. So then I'm going to make sure that that's flush, screw in, make sure that's flush, screw in, make sure that's flush, screw in, make sure that's flush all the way down. We got that on and it's very straight. Because it has to be, because now we can't get to these screws. Yeah, we would have to take this all out just to get to these screws. So that's why you had to make sure that that bottom fence was straight before you put everything in. I guess I could have put like the screws kind of in the center here, like 2 of them, and then just took one out and then I needed to adjust, whatever. I have these aluminum shims that I use to joint 2 pieces of wood together, but it fits in there actually quite perfectly and it is long enough, and I think it should give enough resistance from this handle to push in. So I'm going to try these first. So the handle that you made too, you got to make sure when it's in there you have it oriented the right way, because if you pull up there should be a little bit of a gap, and if you pull down it should just rub onto this fence also slightly. If you have it the wrong way you'll get less rubbage against the fence when it's down. You just got to make sure that you have it the right way. When I actually made this hole, it was actually not completely in the center, which was perfect. It was actually by accident. I was supposed to have it off-centered by just a little bit. Make sure you compensate for that instead of drilling it directly in the center, because if you drill it in the center, when you have it up and when you have it down, it's going to be the same type of pressure that's on the fence. But since it's a little bit downward, when I do push it down, that makes this butt go towards the fence a little bit more, and that's how the mechanism actually works. Before we put the other side on, I want to put these plates on because I think this will just complete it. Yeah, so as you can see, there's a little gap right there that's going to fit these perfectly in. I got these neoprene washers that I was able to cut a bigger hole. That's going to give me some gappage so I can easily maneuver the handle. So it's looking great so far. As you can see, when I go to clamp down, it's actually really tight, but this piece and this piece starts to try to pull away from the fence because it's pushing so much pressure onto the slide rail here. So what I want to do is put 2 more screws here and 2 screws here, and then try to make this all one piece. Normally you're supposed to probably glue this together so everything just stays nice and tight. I want to make sure that everything is tight first before I start gluing things up. This is really cool. I am super happy with this. I was actually kind of confused as how this was actually going to work, but now that it does, it's actually very impressive. That locks so well. And there's a little bit of wiggle. I don't know if the box is going to address that or the fence is going to address that, but we're going to go ahead and put the top of this fence box on. I want to show you the issue that I've run into here. I can't get this far back and screw it in at the same time. Even if I try to clamp it, it still moves because it's just so hard. I actually found these two pieces, just scrapped, and then I also have a wedge right here, or a shim, whatever you want to call it. This part is going to just act as a lift, and this part is actually going to be the part that I actually wedge. And then you'll see when I shove everything in, it should move that piece out just enough. And I can just move the wedge out just to get it flushed, or however I like it. That's really good. So what you want your table saw fence to be is square to your table saw top as well. So that's what I'm doing right now. I have it clamped in, I have it squared. So what I'm going to do is start putting in the screws now.